Hi everyone, this is Mrs. Cruz. We're going to get started on our YouTube videos for the readings. So this is week 6, and if you are wondering, we are going to be focusing on chapter 7 this week. So as usual, if you're trying to catch up, then you are better off looking at previous videos and previous chapters, which you will all find by clicking this YouTube video document. There you will find all the recordings that I have made just like this, where I complete all of the different readings. So it's all organized for you to reference. So please go to the previous chapters if you need to. If you are interested in this week's readings, today we will be reading pages 1 through 7 of chapter 7, and we will be answering text dependent question number 1. So thank you for following along with me. As you know, in previous videos on the first chapters, we do these steps together of the vocabulary. Now that we're into that zone, I skipped this step with you guys. So please make sure, as I normally tell you, pause it here if you feel like completing this step right now. The 2 words that you should be completing are interminable and distinct. So try pronouncing that on your own. Interminable and distinct. Interminable means endless. Usually it's used, if you guys see there, it's like a hyperbole, which should be a reminder to you guys because we talked about hyperboles, and that's when you exaggerate something. So usually you say something's interminable when you're trying to be dramatic, I guess. Like you can say this quarantine feels interminable, even though we have all had that moment where we probably feel like this. The other word distinct means readily distinguishable by the senses. So if something has a distinct smell, you know what that smell is right away. Like if you walk into if you walk into a room and you smell a distinct smell, you can tell right away, like, oh, I smell coffee, or oh, I smell bacon, or anything that has a distinct smell like that. So distinct just means you could easily tell what that is. Okay, here are the 4 questions that we're looking at for this chapter. What lesson does Uncle Hammer teach Stacy? Why? What challenges did Mr. Morrison face in the past? What important lesson about Jeremy does Stacy gain from Mr. Logan? And lastly, what does Mr. Jameson offer to do? What caution does he remind the Logans of? So as you can see in this chapter, we're going to dig in deeper to a lot of characters that we haven't really focused on before. Like we're going to learn more about Uncle Hammer. So let's make his question a different color. I'm going to go for like a light yellow in this one. Let's go for the light colors. The challenges that Mr. Morrison faces. So we're going to get to know about Mr. Morrison a little bit more. We're going to learn about Mr. Logan a little bit more, which is Cassie's dad, right? And we're going to learn about Mr. Jameson a little bit more. So all of these will get a different color for me. Remember, you can choose whatever colors you would like. I'm just feeling the light mode right now. The other step that I like to take is this one. We know that we're going to stop after page 7, we said. So we're going to find that stop and highlight it, that bright green color. That way we know where to start tomorrow's readings. So here's page 7. So let's just say I'm going to stop at the end of this paragraph. So I'm going to put this in the bright green. Okay, and then from there, we are ready to get started. Here we go. Chapter 7. You should be asking yourself, how did chapter 6 end? And we know that at the end of chapter 6, they're crossing a bridge and something important happens. Please try to remember what happens at the end of chapter 6. Okay, so the answer is that they're crossing the bridge and Uncle Hammer forces his way first through the bridge and makes a white family wait. Now, it's not just any white family that he makes wait. That's also important. What family does he make wait? The Wallace family, known for their store, right? The Wallace store. And we know that's a big deal because that's a huge sign of disrespect. So I would say go back and read that last section if you need to again to see, because the last thing that Mama says is we're going to have to pay for that. So we'll see if that happens in chapter 7. Let's get going. Stacy, go bring me your coat. Mama said a few days later as we gathered around the fire after supper. I've got time to take up the sleeves now. Uh-oh, exclaimed Christopher John, then immediately opened his reader as Mama looked down at him. Little man cupped his hand and whispered to me, "Boy, now he's gonna get it." That's all right, Mama," stuttered Stacy. The coat's all right like it is." Mama opened her sewing box. "It's not all right. Now go get it for me." Stacy stood up and started slowly toward his room. Little man, Christopher John, and I watched him closely, wondering what he was going to do. He actually went into the room, but was gone only a moment before he reappeared and nervously clutched the back of his chair. "I ain't got the coat, Mama," he said. "Not got the coat?" cried Big Ma. Uncle Hammer looked up sharply from his paper, but remained silent. Okay, so a quick reminder here. What coat are they talking about? So we should be remembering that he received He received a coat from his Uncle Hammer as like an early Christmas gift because Uncle Hammer saw that the coat he had at that time was like in really bad condition. So now his Stacy's mom was asking him to get it for him so that way she could fix it. And now he's saying he doesn't have the coat. So that's very interesting. Okay, let's keep going. "Stacy," Mama said irritably, "bring me that coat, boy." "But Mama, I really ain't got it. I gave it to TJ. "TJ?" Mama exclaimed. "Yes, ma'am, Mama," Stacy answered, then went on hurriedly as Mama's eyes glittered with rising anger. "The coat was too big for me and TJ said it made me look like a preacher, and he said since it fit him just right, he'd take it off my hands till I grow into it. Then that way all the guys would stop laughing at me and calling me preacher." He paused, waiting for someone to speak, but the only sound was a heavy breathing and the crackle of burning hickory. Then, seeming more afraid of the silence than putting his neck further into the noose, he added, "But I didn't give it to him for good, Mama. I just lent it to him till I get big enough for it, and then—" Stacy's voice faded into an inaudible whisper as Mama slowly put the sewing box on the table behind her. I thought she was headed for the wide leather strap hanging in the kitchen, but she did not rise. In quiet anger, she glared at Stacy and admonished, "In this house, we do not give away what loved ones give to us. Now go bring me that coat." Backing away from her anger, Stacy turned to leave, but Uncle Hammer stopped him. "No," he said. "Leave the coat where it is." Mama turned bewildered towards Uncle Hammer. "Hammer, what are you saying? That's the best coat Stacy's ever had, and probably ever will have as long as he lives in this house. David and I can afford a coat like that." Uncle Hammer leaned back in his chair, his eyes cold on Stacy. "Seems to me, if Stacy's not smart enough to hold on to a good coat, he don't deserve it. As far as I'm concerned, TJ can just keep that coat permanently. At least he knows a good thing when he sees it." "Hammer," Big Ma said, "let the boy go get the coat. That TJ probably done told him all sorts." "Well, ain't Stacy got a brain? What the devil should he care what TJ thinks or TJ says? Who is this TJ anyway? Does he put clothes on Stacy's back or food in front of him?" Uncle Hammer stood and walked over to Stacy as little man Christopher John and I followed him fearfully with our eyes. "I suppose if TJ told you it was summertime out there and you should run buck naked down the road because everybody else was doing it, you'd do it too, huh?" No, sir," Stacy replied, looking at the floor. "Now you hear me good on this. Look at me when I'm talking to you, boy." Immediately Stacy raised his head and looked at Uncle Hammer. "If you ain't got the brains of a flea to see that this TJ fellow made a fool of you, then you'll never get anywhere in this world. It's tough out there, boy, and as long as there are people, there's going to be somebody trying to take what you got and trying to drag you down. It's up to you whether you let them or not. Now, it seems to me you wanted that coat when I gave it to you. Ain't that right?" Stacy managed a shaky, "Yes, sir." "And anybody with any sense would know it's a good thing. Ain't that right?" This time, Stacy could only nod. "Then if you want something and it's a good thing and you got it in the right way, you better hang on to it and don't let nobody talk you out of it. You care what a lot of useless people say about you, you'll never get anywhere, 'cause there's a lot of folks don't want you to make it. You understand what I'm telling you?" Yes, sir, Uncle Hammer," Stacy stammered. Uncle Hammer turned, then went back to his paper without having laid a hand on Stacy, but Stacy shook visibly from the encounter. Okay, let's pause there. So this really goes with question number 1. So if you go back to question number 1 and you read it, what lesson does Uncle Hammer teach Stacy? So you should take a moment right now, pause, and see if you can highlight some evidence on your own, and then we'll check to see if we're highlighting the same thing. So my highlighting starting really on page 3, when they're trying to tell Uncle Hammer that, they're trying to tell Stacy to go back and get the coat back from TJ, and Uncle Hammer says, nope. If he's not smart enough to hang on to it, then he doesn't deserve it. At least TJ knows a good thing when he sees it. So I'm going to highlight that because that's definitely a big part of his lesson. And then he goes on to say, does he put food on or clothes on TJ's back? So he's basically reminding Stacy, like, why do you care so much what this guy has to say? Like, what does he do for you, right? And then he's like kind of reminding him, like, TJ is going to be bossing you around. Like, if he tells you that it's summertime, because we know right now it's really cold, that's why he gave him the coat. But he's saying, like, if he's telling you it's summertime, are you going to run out there naked because he's telling you to? And then I like that evidence. And I also like when he says that if you ain't got the brains of a flea to see that TJ made a fool of you, then you'll never get anywhere in this world. So it's basically, I'm going to highlight that part. I think it's really funny that he tells him that it doesn't take somebody with much brains to realize that he's made a fool. And I like that he's also reminding him that some people are going to get in his way if he lets them. And then finally at the end he says, like, if you have a good thing, hang on to it, especially if you got it in an honest way, because people would be trying to take things from you. Okay, so that's a lot of advice that he gets from his Uncle Hammer. Okay, let's read a little bit more. Christopher John, Little Man, and I exchanged apprehensive glances. I don't know what they were thinking, but I, for one, was deciding right then and there not to do anything to rub Uncle Hammer the wrong way. I had no intention of ever facing a tongue lashing like that. Papa's bottom-warming whippings were quite enough for me, thank you. So there's Cassie saying, like, geez, Uncle Hammer really laid it on my brother. I don't ever want to go through that because it's scary. Okay, let's keep going. The last days of school before Christmas seemed interminable. So there's our vocabulary word there, interminable. Each night I fell asleep with the hope that the morning would bring Papa, and each morning when he wasn't there, I trudged to school, consoling myself that he would be home when I returned. But the days passed prickly cold and windy, and he did not come. Added to the misery of the waiting and the cold was Lillian Jean, who managed to flounce past me with a superior smirk twice that week. I had already decided that she had two flounces too many, but since I hadn't yet decided how to handle the matter, I postponed doing anything until I had a chance to talk with Papa about the whole strawberry business. I knew perfectly well that he would not tear out of the house after Mr. Sims as Uncle Hammer had done, for he always took time to think through any move he made, but he would certainly advise me on how to handle Lillian Jean. Okay, so here's another reminder of a past chapter. What happens to Cassie at Strawberry, and why does she feel like she wants to get some kind of revenge on Lillian Jean? But here we have that Cassie's actually thinking on it, which is important. So she's not just doing some quick act. Her plan is to do what so far? Her plan is to, like, ask her dad about it and get his opinion, right? Since she's saying that her dad thinks things through, unlike her Uncle Hammer. Okay, let's read this paragraph and then we'll pause for part 2. Then, too, there was TJ, who, although not really my problem, was so obnoxiously flaunting Stacy's wool coat during these cold days, and I had just about decided to deflate him at the same time I took care of Lillian Jean. Ever since the night Mr. Avery brought him to the house to return the coat, and he had been told by Uncle Hammer and a faltering Stacy that the coat was his, TJ had been more unbearable than usual. He now praised the coat from the wide tips of its lapels to the very edges of its deep hem. No one had ever had a finer coat. No one had ever looked better in a coat. No one could ever hope to have such a coat again. So if you remember that he was one of the ones teasing Stacy, you'll know why this is so annoying. we'll see more of this part 2.